Hi everyone, welcome back to This Book Belongs to Pam, and let's talk about the books that I read in the month of June and July. I know, I have been gone from booktube, bookstagram, book anything for the past, I don't know, 6 weeks, maybe 5-6 weeks. And really it's mostly because I have just been very very busy for the month of July. Why am I getting attacked by my dogs? There's another dog in here. There you go. Yeah, I've been so busy in July because my mom visited from the States, so I just wanted to spend that time with her. This is the first time we've been together in the Philippines for the last 6-7 years, so it was pretty special, and she was only here for less than 2 weeks, so I really wanted to just focus on our time together. And obviously I had to clean up the entire house in preparation for that. And then the week after she left, I was just catching up on work, catching up on rest, so it was just a whole affair. But now I'm back and I want to talk about the books I read in June before I forget them. And I'm lumping in July because I did not read much in July. For the first 24 days of July, I did not read a single word, and then I just read 2, almost 3 books in the last days of July. So I just want to include them all in this wrap up and get the ball rolling again. Without further ado, let's first look at the stats for June and see what we've got here because I don't remember anymore. I've got my laptop here, and it says here that in the month of June, I read a total of 9 books, and that is 3,356 pages with 2.15 hours. The books that I read are adventurous, emotional, and tense. Those are in my top 3 moods, and I'm trying to remember the books, and I think it fits. There's a new stat in Storygraph. It's the average time to finish. So for me, it's 4 days. I read 44% digital, which is 4 books, and then 5 books physical, which is amazing. I've been wanting to continue reading my physical TBR. And also, if you haven't seen that yet, I have new shelves. More on that in an upcoming vlog. And yeah, my average rating is 4.1 stars, which is, I think, the highest it's ever been. So it was a pretty good reading month, June, so that's why I don't want to skip it. I want to talk about the books because they were pretty good books. Yeah, those are my stats, and let's just jump right into the books because that's what you all are here for, right? The first couple of books that I finished for this month were Gemina and Obsidio by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. So these are the last 2 books, so book 2 and book 3 in the Illuminae file series, and I read this as part of my reading all the series I'm in the middle of vlog. I'm gonna link that down below, so if you want really in-depth thoughts, that vlog is what you need. But overall, I really enjoyed, these are heavy, so I'm just gonna put it down, okay? Overall, I really enjoyed these 2 books. Initially, I was a bit apprehensive because I was just so with Illuminae. It wasn't bad, it wasn't good, it was like fun to read because if you didn't know, this is kind of like a mixed media format where all of the pages here are kind of like documents. So this is like a dossier of found papers, documents, whatever, and they just compile it together to form the Illuminae files. So it's really fun to read, really engaging, but I'm just generally not a space girly. Like I typically don't gravitate towards movies, books, stories that are set in space. I'm just not that type of girl. But this one was really approachable, really easy to understand. It's not so much about space, but rather about just this society of people that live in space. So it's not really the space aspect. That's not the most important thing. It's just the setting for essentially something that could also happen in Earth, if you will. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I can't say too much because it will spoil the first book, but really quickly, Gemina, I gave this one 4.75 stars, so pretty high. Really enjoyed the characters in here. So I think in the first book, we follow a different set of characters, and then in this book, we follow another set of characters, but they're all in the same universe. And then lastly, Obsidio, which is the finale to this trilogy. I gave this one 5 stars. So this was my first 5-star for June. And I think the reason why I really enjoyed it is that it really merged the different storylines and the different characters together so well. And it also has a lot of the stuff taking place in Earth or in the land, not in space. So maybe that's why I liked it. I love the characters from illuminae. I love the characters from Gemina. And all, I don't want to spoil, of them are in this third book. So it just makes it a lot more fun. And I'm also already invested in the characters. So reading this was just a delight. Like, it was so easy to read. I read it so fast. Again, more in-depth thoughts in that reading vlog. So those were the first 2 books I read. So very successful start to the month. And then, as part of that vlog, I also read The Kind Worth Saving by Peter Swanson. So this is the second book in the Henry Kimball series, but the first book is The Kind Worth Killing, which I love. I don't know what I gave that. Probably around 4 and above, 4.5. I don't know if it's a 5-star book, but I really, really enjoyed that. I especially love the ending of that book. This book, however, I gave 2 stars. I really didn't enjoy it. I felt like it wasn't necessary. Follows the same detective from the first book, and some of the characters from the first book also sort of make an appearance in this book as well. And it's a different case, but in general, I feel like they just tried a little bit too hard to like connect the dots like with the 2 books, and I might have appreciated it more if it was completely different characters. And I think it kind of diluted the ending of the first book for me, and honestly, I would not recommend you to read this. It has still that signature, or I don't know if it's signature, I've only read 1 book before this. It has the same writing style as The Kind Worth Killing, where you are following 2 people, and one of them is in the present timeline and one of them is in the past. And it's really interesting to read, but overall, the story I did not enjoy. The ending, so unsatisfying. I absolutely hated that ending. I think my 2 stars here were kind of generous, honestly, now that I've like 1 month removed from reading it. But yeah, I don't recommend it at all. So the next book that I read is Spy X Family Volume 11. 4.5 stars. This was really just a palette cleanser in between the different books that I read. I remember that this was such an interesting volume in Spy X Family because rather than having 5 different like short stories per chapter, because that's usually how Spy X Family operate, it's like a sitcom where each episode is like a little bit standalone-ish in terms of story. This one is just one full story that encompasses the entire volume, which I really enjoyed, and that's probably why I gave it 4.5 stars. But yeah, this is one of my favorite chapters. I think another one of my favorite was the one where we got the backstory of Lloyd. I just really like it when they focus on one continuing narrative for the entire volume. But yeah, that is Spy X Family Volume 11. And then the next book that I read is The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the second book in the Folk of the Air trilogy, and it's been a while since I read The Cruel Prince, so initially I had a bit of a hard time getting back into it. I kind of forgot the things that happened. I had to like review a couple of the stuff that I tabbed in the first book, as well as like what happened in the ending, because I remember the ending being shocking, but I don't remember the details that much. After I refreshed my memory, this was such an interesting read, and I just really applaud Holly Black's ability to describe things, like the way that she describes nature in kind of like a beautiful but also gruesome way. I really applaud her for that. She has opened my eyes to what I guess the more traditional style of fairies actually look like, and they're not handsome. They're not gorgeous to me, and I don't find them appealing. And I don't know, it's just so funny that that's her depiction of fairies, and I think that is more rooted to what fairies would actually look like based on historical literature. It's really so fun to read, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed the story. Like initially I was a little bit bored Probably because, I was having a hard time getting into it because I forgot stuff from the first book. But then I'm just generally not interested in fairy stories. Like, I'm not drawn to it. But the way that she writes, the way that the characters act, and the way that they speak, the dialogue, that kind of hooked me in after like halfway point in the book. And I really enjoyed where this went. I did not expect that. I did not expect anything that happened in this book, and that made it all the more fun for me to read. And yeah, I gave this one 4.25 stars, and I'm excited to read the last book, which is The Queen of Nothing. Or no, yeah, The Queen of Nothing. Excited to read the last book in the series. I'm probably not gonna delay that any further lest I forget more details from the first and second book. But so far, really loving Holly Black's writing in this one, and I definitely recommend it if you haven't read the Folk of the Air trilogy yet. So yeah, that is The Wicked King by Holly Black. The next book that I read is a bit of a different vibe. I read Cabinet of Curiosities by Ambeth Ocampo. So this is a nonfiction, and it is all about different historical artifacts in the Philippines and, what it says about history. And Ambeth Ocampo is a well-known, well-respected historian in the Philippines. It just has snippets of Filipino history, essentially. I learned a lot about different artifacts that we have, the histories of those, and how kind of the climate of the time affected what happened to those artifacts or people's perception of those artifacts. And yeah, it was just really interesting. I highly recommend you read this if you are interested at all in Filipino culture, Filipino literature, or rather Filipino history. Highly recommend this one. It's very easy to read. This used to be published in the newspaper as a daily column, so it's very succinct, straight to the point, and approachable, very bite-sized. So definitely recommend this one. You can even just read one a day, and it's kind of like a fun fact, a trivia for the day, and I really like it. So Cabinet of Curiosities, I gave this one, I have not rated it in my story graphs. Oh my gosh. So my average rating earlier is so wrong. Kind of having a crisis right now. I don't remember what... Okay, I need to pause this, go back through all the vlogs, and rate the books. Hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Crisis. It's resolved. Can't believe I did that. Okay. I feel kind of off. Okay, I was talking about Cabinet of Curiosities, so I gave this one 4.5 stars. But yeah. I can't believe I did that. Okay, anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. Okay, Cabinet of Curiosities, Ambeth Ocampo, 4.5 stars. Now, the next book that I read is The Art Thief, A True Story of Love, Crime, and Dangerous Obsession by Michael Finkel. Another nonfiction, which is surprising. I don't read a lot of nonfictions. I've read 2 this June, and it was really good. This one is all about an art thief, and this thief is a lot more infamous than others because he actually managed to steal hundreds of art pieces, ranging from paintings to weapons to brass sculptures. The list is endless. He stole them from museums all over Europe, and he essentially just displays it in his own home. He has this sort of vision that he just wants to be in a place where he can see, admire, appreciate all of these works of art. He's very anti-museum because he feels like it doesn't really allow you, it's very restrictive. He wants to be able to touch art, feel art, and admire art at any way, shape, or form. And that's why he just steals them and brings it back home. So it took a while, years, for him to be caught. And it was just a very interesting story. And the fact that it's real makes it even more interesting. This nonfiction book gave me what Portrait of a Thief didn't. I don't know, it just went into detail about his mindset, the actual heist, like what he did with his partner at the time and the aftermath consequences, what the law enforcement did or didn't do. And it's just so interesting. I highly recommend this book. It's only 240 pages, so such a quick read, and it goes by so fast. So if you have any fascination with art and art heist, this is a book for you. Highly recommend it. That is The Art Thief, and I gave it 4 stars. And the second to the last book, the penultimate book that I read in July, which was part of, I now realize what I read all of these books for. I read it for my TBR Gacha video, like the first episodes. I'm gonna link that below as well. The final book that I read for that video is Happy Place by Emily Henry. So I finally gave Emily Henry another try after, feeling very so-so about book lovers. This one, if you watch that vlog, you would see me bawling my eyes out because this book just sent me into a different dimension. I tabbed it quite a bit. I'm not a big tabber, so this is a lot for me. I tabbed it when I cried. When I found something so relatable, I tabbed it, and this book. And honestly, I also mentioned it in that video that this was a deeply personal book for me. The reason why it hit me so hard was because the things that happened to these people, the overall circumstances that happened to them, if you distill it down to its simplest terms, is something that I have experienced in my own life, in my own relationships, and it just hit a lot harder because of that. And I just really loved it. And I think Emily Henry, even with book lovers, even though I didn't enjoy that book as much as I did this one, she has such a good grasp of how to write so that people can relate to your writing. It kind of reminds me of Taylor Swift's lyrics. The reason why Taylor Swift's lyrics and songs are so good is in huge part because of how the lyrics are so relatable. Not because it's simply written, but because it puts into words your feelings in something that's very visceral for you. So that is how I felt with Emily Henry's writing in Happy Place, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. So now I'm a lot more excited to hop on to the Emily Henry hype train, and I don't know what book I'm gonna pick up next. I have Funny Story in my Libby right now, but I don't know if I loved Oh, by the way, I gave this 5 stars. If it wasn't obvious, 5 stars. My second 5-star for June. So June was a really good reading month. But yeah, if you can recommend an Emily Henry that I would love based on the fact that I absolutely love Happy Place, let me know in the comments. I would be grateful. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this one, and I can't wait for the time where I'm gonna reread it because I have all of these tabs that I can look back on, and I loved it so much. So Happy Place by Emily Henry. The final book that I read for June is The Farm by Joanne Ramos. So this book, I actually don't remember how I found out about this book. I just know that it focuses on the Filipino immigrant experience, especially Filipino caretakers. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about this book because I don't think it's super known by a lot of people, and I think it's a really good read. I gave it 4.25 stars. So The Farm, we are following, I have forgotten names, but essentially we are following these young women who have migrated to the States legally and illegally, and they're living in this one sort of apartment, and they essentially work as caregivers, some of them like nannies, all of those service jobs for rich families in New York. It focuses on specific people, but in general it just talks about their life as expats and the hardships that OFW is what we call them in the Philippines, overseas Filipino workers. What OFWs go through, in terms of sacrificing time with their family. They spend all of their time in the States sending money back to the Philippines to keep their families alive, fed. So they're making that sacrifice. There's so many factors in an OFW's life. For example, a lot of OFW feel very alone. They feel very isolated. They feel essentially like a tool because they're just workhorses essentially, and their entire life is just dedicated to working and then sending money back to the Philippines. They live in the States. They're usually, when you have migrated to the States, there's this, I guess, stereotype here in the Philippines where you've made it and you're the rich person. But the conditions that they're living in that apartment building, it's horrendous. Like, they don't have money for basic needs. They don't have insurance. They don't have like their own place. They share it in bunk beds and everything. And then there's this factor of the family back home in the Philippines feeling very resentful that you're always away. You never spend time with family. You like the US more than the Philippines. You don't want to come home to us, when it couldn't be further from the truth. With that backdrop, like with that context, we know that these OFWs more often than not are desperate for anything that could make life easier, that could make money come in easier. So when this big opportunity comes in for our main character, where she is gonna become a surrogate essentially for a rich family, she takes it and she gets put into this very utopian like place where all of the hosts, that's what they're called, the surrogates, are treated with 100% like pampering, because everything is being done to create the best babies possible. Because the rich families that avail of this service, they're not availing it because they can't get pregnant, like there's biologically a problem. It's because they want to cultivate the best baby, so they get the best genes, they get the best environment, and they also don't want to take on the burden, or I guess the hardships of pregnancies. It's either because they're, high-powered CEOs and they don't want to take the time off, or they don't want to ruin their figure, or they just, don't want the hassle of pregnancy. So they offload that essentially to these hosts in this like utopian facility. So this facility, it sounds so good because you are treated so well. You're fed the most nutritious meals. Your babies get like Mozart, like headphones, ultrasound thingy to keep them calm. You get massages, you get exercise, you have a coach for diet, you have a coach for fitness, you have a therapist, you have everything is provided. Like, it's the perfect, I guess, breeding ground for the rich families to have, I don't know, like the best baby in the world. There's so many factors, and obviously we go into the psyche of the different hosts, the different surrogates. Like, some of them are in it just like business. They don't freaking care. They're just like popping babies left and right, and they're getting all of this money. And some of them are very idealistic about it. Like, they want to do this because they believe that they're providing something for a family that can't, have a baby of their own for whatever reason. And they treat it as like, I don't know, a calling. So I don't know, I found it so interesting. And the things that happen here is kind of crazy, but also at the same time very rooted in reality, and I loved it so much. The ending is a little bit surprising, like how things ended, and at the same time it's realistic. Because obviously it has a very dystopian setting, so you would kind of expect an ending to be somewhat of a rebellion, right? Whether that's overthrowing the status quo, like abolishing this utopian pregnancy breeding ground center thing, or I don't know, something more tragic, right? But this one is a little bit in between, where it feels unsatisfying, but at the same time it's satisfying because it is exactly what would likely happen in real life if this were an actual thing. And I really enjoyed it. Definitely keep an eye out for more books by Joanne Ramos, because I really enjoyed her thinking and the concepts that she went with in this book, and I highly recommend it. But obviously, if you cannot stand pregnancy, like you don't like to read about pregnancy, childbirth, things like that, this is not the book for you, because it just goes like hard on babies, like breastfeeding, pregnancy, birthing, like all of that is this book. But I really enjoyed it for the concepts it brought forward and the social issues that it tackled. So highly recommend this one. I gave it 4.25 stars. That is The Farm by Joanne Ramos. So I'm really happy with all of the books I read in June. as I mentioned, I was in a slump for the most of July, so I actually only have 2 books to share for the July portion of this wrap up, and I don't think I'm gonna give you the rating of the books just yet, just because I have the next video that's coming up is a video that talks specifically about this book because it is a collaboration video. I'm gonna show you the books. I'm not gonna tell you what the collaboration is about. I'm gonna give you just overall feelings. I'm gonna leave the ratings for that video, and if you are curious about, you know, my thoughts, like in-depth real-time thoughts about these books, make sure to watch out for that video that's gonna come out on Sunday. I am gonna make that happen. The books that I read for that video: The Lovely War by Samantha Downing and Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. So I read these 2 books and I had a really interesting time. I first read The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, and I have been wanting to read this for a long time, mostly because I know that a lot of people are raving about a lot of people are raving about this and how it's such like a unique fantasy, and I agree, it's such a unique take on fantasy. It is definitely more on the urban supernatural type of fantasy. What I didn't expect, but also was a pleasant surprise, was that this book and the story in it is heavily anchored on the King Arthur legends, the Arthurian legend, and I love books with the Arthurian legend. And I don't know, I just found it so fascinating. I like all of the archaeology. I specifically enjoyed all of the why can I say that word? Archaeological vibes this book gave me. Overall, I felt like it was a little bit on the slow side. It took a while to get things going. It was so quirky, I would say, honestly, but it was enjoyable. So stay tuned on Sunday for my final ratings on this book. And lastly, I read My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, and this was such a unique thriller as well. These are very like different books from the ones that I read. So this was such a unique thriller in a sense that it felt like a slice of life type of thriller, where rather than focusing on the crime itself, on the thrilling crime, it focuses on the things around the crime. So it focuses on the people who committed it, the family of those people, the society around it, like what happens to the society, the neighborhood, the cops. It focuses on all of that and not really so much the actual crime, which was quite interesting, and I really like that. I read Defending Jacob by William Landay 2 years ago now, I think, and that also has a similar vibe where it focuses not on the crime but like on the case, the court case, and the people, the family surrounding the crime. And I love books like that because I think obviously the crime is interesting, like the details, the gruesome details of the crime is interesting, but what's more interesting to me is what happens, like how that affects other people, other factors surrounding the crime, and this book did that. So I really enjoyed this for that. This has been recommended to me by a lot of people, like Pam from Pam Shenanigans, and I'm glad that I finally read it. So I will leave the rating for that upcoming video. And with that, I'm closing off this June wrap up with July teaser video, and I'm again just want to say sorry that I took such a long break, and I'm so excited to be back, and I'm so excited to finally, you know, feel good about reading again. And I'm currently in the middle of a book. I think I'm about like 50%. That's also going to be part of the video for next Sunday. So lots to come. I have planned out my calendar for August because I'm going to be joining a couple of readathons. First one is Akdang Pinoy by Kat and Sai. They're hosting it on Instagram, so I will leave a link to their announcement post as well. It's basically just a readathon that's focusing on Filipino literature. That's what Akdang Pinoy means. Filipino literature, essentially. So I am definitely joining that. And then I'm also joining Full Moon Readathon hosted by Jan Agatan. So this is a readathon essentially that has like spooky vibes related to like different collectible creatures. So I will leave a link to her announcement video as well. It runs from the first half of August, like August 1 to 13. So I am going to be joining that as well. So I am going back into booktube in full force, and I am so excited. So Okay, if you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around and hanging out with me, and even though I've been gone for a while. Yeah, I hope you had a good reading month in July and also June, and let me know what your favorite book from the last 2 months are, because I am in need of more book recommendations, even though I have a TBR that's as big as this bookshop. So yeah, again, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video.